G'day, James here. Owen and I recently entered the Tarawera 50k for 2022. Now, neither of us have ever run any sort of distance like that, and it's a little bit daunting, and we wanted to do a little bit of prep. So we decided to have a chat to our friend Steve Wattam. Now, Steve is a very experienced runner. He has run multiple marathons and ultras, including the 100 miler at Tarawera and the 102k at Tarawera. So we asked him to come along and have a chat with us about some of the things we should be thinking about, and he's given us some really great advice. So we hope you get something out of this and enjoy the conversation. Right, so Steve, Owen and I have gone and entered this race, the 50k at Tarawera in 2022. How scared should we be?
I think it depends on how fast you want to do it, is how scared you should be. Okay. I genuinely believe that both you guys are capable of doing the 50k quite easily, to be honest. But it's going to be how hard you want to push yourself and what you want to achieve is how scary it's going to be. So I'd put it back to you guys and say, what are your goals for the 50k?
Well,
showing up,
arriving
at the start line would be great, and then arriving at the finish line.
I want to go out for a nice. I want to go out for a nice meal that night.
Yeah,
so that's got a couple of points to it. I don't know. I've had in mind, and I've been changing my mind on how I feel about this. 6-ish hours. I would like the time to have a 6 in it and not a 7. So I've based that on wanting to do the half in about 2, just over 2 hours. So double that a bit and then build on a little bit of contingency because we're going to be going a bit slower. So I don't know. 6.5 would be great. I hope that's realistic. I'm not yet sure because I think that it's going to go fine, and then there'll be a dip. I'm hoping that the dip will have a rise up at the end, but that's, I suppose, while we're talking to you to see, is that likely?
Yeah, so I'd say, having run with you quite a bit, James and Owen, seeing that you're similar times to James and running with you, that, and I was thinking about it earlier today, is probably at the 6-hour mark, I'd be a little bit scared because that's going to hurt at some stage. And if you move it out towards the 7-hour mark, I wouldn't be scared at all, and I'd book in that 3-course meal.
Okay. So it's 6 hours, 59 minutes then. Should that be the target?
So 6 to 7 seems like a good range for us to be in to kind of be comfortably scared. Like if we want to push it a bit, 6 hours. If we need to, if we need to bail, then we can kind of aim for that 7-ish around that time.
Yeah, I think realistically, it is a pretty runnable course. Like I think there's only 2 or 3 hills where I'd say, hey, you're going to be walking for 5, 6, 7, 10 minutes.
Right.
Other than that, the rest of it is actually really runnable, and certainly that run we did in the Manawatu Gorge, and there's nothing harder than that. And certainly the Toys run that you train on, James, there's nothing even close to that in there.
Oh, and love that
There's
course,
nothing scary in there.
Okay. Well,
it's just that extended distance.
Yeah.
So can you recall that the first time that you did that? How did you find that gap? Because I mean, I guess we kind of consistently or can quite achievably do a 21 pretty much, with a little bit of training or maybe any day of the week. How did you find that step up from? Can you recall what that step up was like from 21 to 50 or?
Yeah, so I'd done 1 or 2 marathons in between. So yeah, I've done the Rotorua Marathon, and I think I might have done the Kinloch Marathon beforehand. So maybe a little bit more experience, but I think
Yep.
that 8Ks bigger than a marathon is probably the daunting bit, and being on trail is a bit harder. But yeah, so I was pretty nervous about it, to be honest. And I think it is a distance that you should give respect to. It's an ultra marathon. So I think it's pretty fair to be nervous, but use that nerves to drive the training and the discipline.
I think you told me before, but I've never run a marathon distance. Is that something that we should be thinking about as preparation?
Yeah, I think it's good. Maybe not a marathon distance per se, like it doesn't have to be 42 Ks. What I'd say is be out on your feet for an extended period of time. So maybe don't worry about the distance. Worry about what happens after I've been running or moving for 3 to 4 hours, because you're only going to know what parts rub and how you actually feel nutrition wise and what works, really pushing that time out. So I think that's the key thing. I wouldn't worry about a distance, but I would worry about maybe getting a 3 to 4 hour training session in, so you know what it's like to be going for that long. And realistically, once you go past 3 hours, my feeling is there's no real difference between 3 hours and 5 hours. Like it's,
Well, that's good to hear, because I've done a couple of 3 hour ones, and I thought the end of it, 5 or 6 hours seems like a long time.
Yeah, but I think, like, if you push yourself in a half marathon, and says, "Oh, Jim, you got to run another 2 or 3 Ks," you'd be like, "There's no way I can do it." So you're going to pace yourself, and both you guys have got the experience, I think, to pace yourself appropriately, where you're not going to blow yourselves up.
Yeah, I hope so. And that's actually a question I was going to ask. What sort of pace? Having sort of run with us, we would run a flat pace. I don't know what's a good sort of thing to describe the pace that we're running at now. If we're running a 10K, we'll run that at about 50-ish minutes on the flat. 5K, I think we're both sub. What are you on, about 23? You're 22 minutes. You're a bit quicker than me. So judging by that, I don't know if that really has much of a bearing on a trail run, but we've got to do 50Ks. What sort of pace is going to be realistic? I've kind of got in mind that I wouldn't mind kicking off at about 6 minute-ish pace, and we'll just see how that goes.
Yeah, so what I'd say is I always, in my rule of thumb, and this is just I guess I'm talking in generalizations and what's right for me. I'm certainly no expert, and there's plenty of people who know more than me. But what I always try and do is just keep a conversation pace.
Right.
So whether it's a marathon or longer, if I'm comfortably having a conversation with the people around me, A, I'm having lots of fun, which is the reason to be out there. And B, I know I'm not pushing too hard.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you start not wanting to talk to the people around you, I think you're really pushing yourself too hard. So I'm a great believer in, if you look at that 50Ks, you say, I'm going to walk for 10% of that race. Yeah, and I think that's probably realistic on a course like the Tarawera 50. If I'm going to walk 10% of that course, do I want it to be up the hills and the tricky bits, or do I want it to be the last 5Ks into town on the flat where I can go really fast? So all I'd say, and that's my pacing strategy, is there's going to be walking somewhere. Let's put it in the most appropriate places. And if I can't hold a good conversation, then I'm not going to get myself to a position where I can finish really strong. So that works really well for me. And I think probably for most people, it's a pretty good general rule of thumb.
Yeah, well, that's pretty good advice.
So do you couple that? Is that your main focus when you're doing that? Is just how you feel? Are you checking your watch? Are you checking your time or stuff like that, or are you just taking that initial bit by feel to begin with?
Yeah, pretty much by feel. What I will do though is use a watch to just make sure I'm not actually going too fast.
Yeah.
So, and certainly over a longer distance, where I haven't particularly got a time goal in mind. So how I structure my longer runs is I tend to pick a point where I want to get to in really good shape. So, for your Tarawera 50, I'd say I want to get to the Redwoods aid station in really good shape.
Yep.
Because if I think it's 6 or 7 Ks to the finish from there.
Yeah.
I've seen plenty of people walk that beautiful, runnable last 6 to 7 Ks.
Yeah.
And so, like with say the miler I did, my goal was to get to Blue Lake in really good shape.
Yep.
So, I think just pick a point, and then you can make decisions throughout your run and go, is walking up this hill going to hinder or help me getting to this point in a really good shape?
Yeah.
And that way you're looking after yourself, and I think it probably is a good conservative way to go.
That's really good advice.
Cool.
Yeah. I feel a little bit better now.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't always work out that way, but I think it does help around some of the big decisions.
Yeah. Sitting here thinking about it now, I'm like, yeah, okay, good. Because we're 5 months away approximately. So we've got, both of us, I think we've got quite a bit of training to do because we've never run anything like that distance. So the time on feet is a key thing, but apart from that, like, what sort of running should we be doing? Is it going to be detrimental if we're running too often and too short and too fast? That sort of thing. Because that's kind of how I feel like most of my running is. I'll go at lunchtime and do 5Ks, and I'll do as quick as I can.
Well, I think any running is probably good running. So I think it's better to get out and do that quick 5K than sort of waiting till you get home and then kids and family come up and not getting anything in at all. And I think we've all been there. So if that 5K window is what you've got, I say just go for it. And that's probably, if a coach ever watches this, which I doubt they will, might have them screaming on the inside. But I think it's, when you're not a professional athlete or a ridiculously serious athlete, I think it is grabbing those windows of opportunities.
Like if you're a portly endurance athlete.
Yeah, like because the big thing with Tarawera is your primo training block, 6, 8, 10 weeks out is Christmas.
Yeah.
So if you want to be fast, you're going to have a big November and a big start of December, because realistically, your wives are going to be pretty mad if you sort of go, oh, that Christmas, New Year's week after period, you can look after the kids, I'm taking off for 3 hours. It ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
So, and that's caught me out a couple of times, as you think, oh, I've got this training window. But realistically, I've found I've never got back into training until 15th of January.
Yeah.
And then you're sort of going 2 weeks and then a taper. Yeah. So I think regardless of what you're doing now, and now is all about building base and trying to get in, good weeks on top of good weeks, that November, first half of December is a real key target. You can't sort of think you're going to catch it up in January, just the way it falls.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind what you said, and time, time constraints are obviously abundant for quite a few people. And this is often seems a bit like a swear word or a curse word with runners. you ever train on a treadmill? Have an opinion of training on a treadmill? Any?
Yeah, so I went and bought a treadmill. I don't enjoy it, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's just been that that thing that has allowed me to do 7Ks on a Monday night at 9:30 at night, when that's been my only window of opportunity.
Yeah.
So probably when I've been training for races, it's probably been something I've used once a week. And I hate to use the term junk miles, but basically I put something on my iPad, hang my iPad on, and just run for 45 minutes or run for an hour, and just to get some Ks in.
Yeah.
Um,
Does that go for like other sorts of training though? Because do you go bike riding or any sort of gym stuff, strength stuff? And when should we be thinking about that?
Oh, look, all the coaches' manuals and stuff would probably say, "Yep, do it." But my logic has been is I get to run 3 or 4 times a week. It's going to be a running event I'm going to do. So if I've got an hour spare or an hour there, I'm going to spend it on the activity I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, certainly if I had 8 or 9 hours to train in a week, I'd be chucking some of that stuff in. But certainly there's probably nothing wrong with 50 press-ups before you put on your work clothes and 50 sit-ups before you go to bed, Jimmy.
Let's start with 5 and we'll work our way up, shall we?
Ouch.
Seeing this is the Portly Endurance Athletes Initiative.
We'll
work up to that one.
How do we transfer that entry? How do we get out of this? That's possible at this stage, isn't it?
Like that. Now, considering we are portly and we're training a bit, can I keep eating and drinking everything that I want to eat and drink, Steve? Please say yes.
Not if you want to go fast.
Oh.
Yeah. Unfortunately. So the wise Kerry Suda once said to me, the quickest way to get faster is to get lighter.
Okay. Damn.
Yeah. So the two can happen hand in hand. But like if you can lose 3 or 4 kilos and not have to carry that around the race, that is significant. And so certainly when I've been at my fastest for me, it's when I've been definitely on the lighter side.
Yeah. Well, that's a blow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it depends if this event's all about having fun, then you want it to be fun leading up to it. So I'd say you don't need to change anything necessarily. And is there a difference between 6 hours, 20 minutes and 6 hours, 40 minutes? I don't think there is. But if 6 hours...
Yeah, what does that equate to in Steele's beer consumption per week? Is that like, 20 minutes at the end?
I need to get someone to figure that out for me. Yeah.
Yeah. There's an algorithm that'll do it for you. You've just got to track it down, mate.
But that's what it's about, isn't it? It's like, if your goal is to hit 6 hours, I'd say, well, Jimmy, that's your last 6-pack.
Yeah.
And that will get you a heck of a lot closer to it than maybe even an extra training run a week.
No more chips either.
Yeah, so obviously, I mean, beer is obviously a big one. Do you change your diet much, Steve, when you kind of go into your serious training blocks, or is your diet generally okay?
No, my diet.
Or do you make kind of tweaks and changes?
I run so I can have a rubbish diet.
Yep.
No, but
amen, brother, amen.
Yeah, I guess if we want a real world example, is when I was training for the miler, which I took really seriously because it was not only a big commitment for me, it was a big commitment for the family. So, everyone was giving up quite a bit because of the time constraints. I actually gave up alcohol and the shit food basically for probably a good 6 months. And yeah, I think that was probably not sort of, without changing anything else too much, it was probably 6 or 7 kilos off.
Wow.
So, if you held 2 3-litre milk bottles and carried that around for an hour or two, you'd know about it. So, yeah, it's just, I guess it goes back to what you want to achieve and, what you're prepared to give up.
Yeah, and I think you made a kind of a big point there as well, is that it's the family consideration too, isn't it? Did you struggle getting that across the line as far as the time commitment that would be needed?
I think everyone was probably a little bit naive. So, it's probably I'd struggle to get it across the line again. But at the time, I think it was sort of just about setting a big goal. And, I guess we've always sort of worked on the thing that if our kids see us doing big things, then when they sort of get the chance, they might try big things of their own. So, it's certainly not something, once you probably go past that 50 Ks, that you can do on your own. It requires a little bit of support and quite a bit of understanding. Yeah.
Right. Well, we'll just get to that 50K one, and then we'll.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, you'll finish it and go, oh, what's next?
How does that go though? Because just to sort of bring you back to that first 50K that you did, you've said it was scary. The prospect is sort of scary, but you've done all that prep for the marathons, and that's cool. You cross that line, is in the day after you think never again, and then the end of that week you go, what's next?
Because I've never once crossed a finishing line and gone, next distance up. In fact, I've always been quite the opposite. And every time I finished anything of, kind of what I would classify as of note, it's pretty much always been the never again. Why would I? And it takes a couple of days, a couple of weeks, a year to kind of build that kind of, to completely forget about the pain that you go through. So do you cross the line and you're like, yeah, fuck this. Yeah, 100 Ks, that's next?
I kind of do. So, I guess how I'm wired is if 1 drink is good and 2 drinks is twice as good, then how good is 4 drinks going to be? I guess what I've sort of, a lot of my motivation has been is, can I handle what 50 Ks is? Like, what am I going to do when it gets hard? What am I going to do when it gets tough? So there's that challenging myself and so 50 Ks was that challenge after a marathon. A marathon is pretty tough. Am I tough enough to do the 50K? Am I tough enough to do the 75K? So it has been gradually, and feel like I've been testing myself, So I guess I have finished a few of those things with what's next. If 50Ks feels this good when you're finishing it, and it will feel bloody fantastic, is 75Ks must feel twice as good. So, yeah.
Because no matter how crappy you're feeling, when you get into that shoot toward that finishing line, there's always another gear, isn't there? It's it's quite enjoyable going down that last bit, and feeling rubbish. For anyone's watching, and if you've run around Rotorua and been through those sulfur flats, they're flat and lovely and horrible all at the same time. And I've never run through there and sort of loved it. It's always, there's just something hard, and you're near the end, but you get into that chute, and there's just a little bit of a gear, and I think that's when you approach any finish line. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that bit, but there's a little bit to get through before that, eh?
Yeah, there is.
So heading out for a big run, Steve, training run or race, how do you structure that? I guess mentally, physically. We talked a little bit about it at the beginning, and you said that you obviously kind of talked about starting off slow and going at that nice pace. How do you get yourself mentally prepared for that big run?
Yeah, so if we're talking longer training run, so and again, you probably don't want to be doing too many of these for a 50k, but sort of if we say 2 hours plus, so I think you want to do a few of them. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to simulate the race as close as possible. So not necessarily the pace or the terrain, but what am I going to do at certain times? So I'll always wear the gear that I think I'm going to wear on race day. So I've had the same shirt that I've probably worn for the last 6 years. So I know that causes me no problems. I've got the same shorts and obviously the shoes that I think I'm going to wear on race day. So what I'm doing is I'm ironing out all those problems. And then what I'm also doing is I'm trying to simulate my nutrition strategy on race day. So what I tend to do is, and works for me, but may not work for everyone, is I structure it around time. So say every hour I'll have a gel on the hour, and just so I know I've had those calories, had that gel. And then on the half hour, my strategy is to have something to eat, and I tend to alternate between Cliff Bars and actually pouches of baby food. So so I've just got those regular times, so I know what I'm going to do at those times. And so what I find on race day is it's sort of, by the time I have my gel and my drink, that's sort of 5 or 10 minutes taken up. I know that in 20 minutes time I've got that, so it actually helps pass the time having that bit of structure around there. So I think the key for your 50k is to be really familiar with the course. So for instance, when are the aid stations going to be, and having a little plan around what you're going to do at that aid station, because a lot of time can be wasted at aid stations. So if there's drop bags there, what you're going to have in those drop bags, and be really specific. But all that should be sorted out in your training, so nothing's unfamiliar, I guess.
I'd like to go back to the thing that you said about baby food, because that interests me. I tend to find, and maybe you can kind of clarify what type of baby food you haven't. I tend to find that if you're sticking with your off-the-shelf products, your gels, your bars, your liquids, they're all sweet. And I tend to find that I get, kind of overdone in a sweet manner very quickly. 3 or 4, or 2 or 3 gels in a 21k, and you might also have your hydration, your electrolytes. That's sweet, and you're starting to build a very, very sweet kind of tasting run. Do you mix that up at all, and the baby foods interested me because obviously you've got some savoury options kind of that potentially could come through there. How do you approach that?
Yeah, well, firstly, I've found the savoury options are not very nice cold.
Righto.
So now look, it's probably a really common thing amongst runners. So I think that's just where you sort of do your longer training runs and work out what works for you in particular. And I've tried some random things like cheese and Marmite sandwiches. I think if you get a craving for it when you're running, then it's probably your body telling you that that's a really good thing to have. But also I'd say be really familiar with what's going to be at the aid stations.
Yep.
And so you can actually develop a plan about a K out. Oh, I really feel like this. I'm going to go straight to that. I'm going to eat that, and then I'm going to move through. And that's where a lot of time can be saved. So I think it's a key is to be really familiar with what is going to be at the aid.
I think Tarawera is quite good at that. They publish that in advance, and it's pretty full on what they put on, isn't it?
Yeah. I think with Tarawera, you're definitely very unlikely to turn up to an aid station and something you expect to be there is not going to be there. Very well stocked, very well supplied.
So I've heard that the train of thought is that you possibly shouldn't eat anything that you haven't trained on. How do you approach that? So you rock up to the aid station. There's a couple of bits of pizza. You've never had pizza on a run before. Are you throwing that back, or are you sticking with what you know?
If I'm feeling like it, I'm chucking it back. To be honest, look, I'm pretty lucky. I'd say I've got a bit of an iron guts. But I think your body's a pretty good regulator at telling you what you want. So I'd say if you stop feeling like having sweet stuff, then knock the sweet stuff on the head for an hour or two. We've probably been sold a really good marketing scam on the gels and the goos and the bars and stuff like that. So, I tend, even on the big runs, to take water on one pouch and electrolytes on the other. And quite often I'll only drink the water. And and then maybe an hour later I'll suck on electrolytes for 2 hours. So I think we're pretty good regulators of ourselves, and as long as you're sort of drinking to first, then the stomach side of things, I think, tends to take care of itself. I'm not a great believer in forcing down 200 calories an hour because you said you should have 200 calories an hour. I think that's probably a bigger recipe for disaster than not listening to your gut.
Right. Cool. You talked about training in your mandatory gear. We've never really had to carry mandatory gear, so what should we be thinking about there? Is there any tricks?
But the trick is, I think, to just accept that you have to have the mandatory gear, and then the next trick is to either go out and buy it or borrow it as light and as good a quality as possible. My logic has always been is the mandatory gear I never think of as being for me. I think of it as if I come across someone who's hurt or injured in a race, I actually want to be able to look after them because I'd want someone to look after me when I've been hurt or injured. So if you have to spend 4 hours or 5 hours with that person, which is actually realistic in some of the environments we run in, then to look after that person, you've got to be able to keep yourself warm, you've got to be able to keep yourself dry, and they might need an extra jacket or an extra beanie or whatever the gear is. So I just say get really good quality stuff, and I think don't think of it as a burden. A lot of people get tied up with that as being a burden. I think it's just one of those things. And you look with what happened in that race in China. And certainly we're not running in extreme climates like that. But if someone was to fall down a bank and break his leg and you had to spend 4 or 5 hours with them, then you want to be able to look after yourself and look after them. Yeah,
that's a good point. It definitely. I've had a couple of runs with the full gear, and you do feel like you've got a bit on. It sort of feels like armor in a way, and then also like, oh yeah, I'm going a bit slower, which is a good reason for training with it on, right?
No, definitely. So on those longer runs, I'll probably have 90% of my mandatory gear, and normally on those longer training runs, you probably want to sort of have it to look after yourself, just in case you fell over and sprained an ankle, or
for sure,
or it took a bit longer than you thought. Yeah, but I guess on that, if you have to buy some gear to meet the mandatory gear requirements, I'd say spend the money and buy the good stuff, because the amount of stuff I've bought twice, because I bought the cheap version and I've gone back and bought a good version.
So you're out there, you're on your first 50K run, you've got your mandatory gear, you've trained in it, everything's going great. What's some of those things that happen that you may not have expected? You're running a longer distance you ever have before, you're 30Ks in, you got to take a dump. What about all those little bits and pieces?
Yeah, so there is a bit of etiquette around that. Don't dump on the trail.
Of course.
That's where we went
that
wrong.
makes so much sense now. Yeah.
Yeah, I always like to take 3 or 4 steps off and do it.
There is like
every single
a certain
time
amount of steps, isn't there? There's like a world baseline for the amount of steps you meant to take off the trail before you do a poo. I think I was reading something the other day. So 3 to 4.
At least. Yeah.
At least, yeah.
That's a good point. Then. So it's not
do
on
you
the
smile and wave as well?
It's not on the mandatory gear list, but you should probably take a little bit of bog roll.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, 100% a bit of bog rolls always in the pack, and you'll learn that in your longer training runs that it's just going to happen. So yeah,
longer.
But,
I've had to go on the side of the road after a 2-kilometer run. Was not prepared for that.
Getting the whole experience.
Nothing more dignifying than taking a poo, is there?
Steve, what are you rubbing where before you run?
Well, because I've lost all this weight before I run, Owen, nothing is rubbing nowhere.
What?
Oh, that must be a nice feeling.
I thought if you like it, lube it.
Yeah, I have heard if you like it, lube it.
I can't really talk on this. I've never ever touched wood. I've been very lucky. I haven't had any rubbing issues.
Not even had to apply a little bit of tape or anything.
He's a skinny man.
No, there's no tape required.
Really?
I just wear the same t-shirt the whole time.
Okay.
No tape.
I saw Jim Wormsley take his top off the other day, and he looked like he had like electrical tape over his nipples. So even the skinniest of the skinny do need nipple tape. James, don't you worry, mate. Don't you worry.
I'm in good company.
You are.
I believe Jim Wormsley runs slightly faster than me. So
maybe a bit, maybe a bit that you.
Blisters are at the forefront of my mind, because I always get them in the same spot. And I'm just wondering how I'm going to manage it when I get to those big distances. Because I can get one in a half marathon, I'll always get a blister in the same spot, pretty much.
Yeah. Again, it's just going to be something you're going to have to iron out in training.
Yeah.
Try a few different strategies.
Yeah.
Different socks, pre-taping.
Yeah. Different tape as well, I think I might have to think about, because I've tried some before. Then you wind up with that particular kind of tape just pushing all of its stickiness through your sock, and then you wreck your socks. I like my socks. Okay, I have to work through that.
Yeah, can't help you. Sorry, mate.
Okay. Stuff that you should have in your pack. Little bits and pieces that you might not think about.
So, always toilet paper.
Yep.
Yeah, always $20 just in case.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Obviously, if you think you're going to be finishing close tonight, you'd be a headlamp and some spare batteries.
Yep. What time do we start, Owen?
Oh, not late.
7 a.m., isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'd be having a shock. We'd be having a shocker.
Yep. Okay. Let's just see how training goes. Yep. Okay. So maybe a headlamp for us.
I don't think. I think you boys will be right. No, I'm just trying to think. Yeah, probably your mandatory gear, honestly, is gonna cover it, plus a bit of toilet paper, and probably just a little chuck an extra bar in more than you think you need, and an extra couple of gels. And yeah, even if you end up giving your gel to someone you see struggling on the sort of a side of a road, you can always offer them a friendly gel and not put yourself in a situation where you're going to run out. Oh, yeah. The other thing I'd say, Jimmy, is just with your drop bags. You guys have drop bags for 50k?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd say probably not really vital in the 50k to have it, but it's probably a good learning experience for if you go up further distances. So you just have a think about what you want on that drop bag. Generally, just a bit of extra nutrition. If the weather looks a bit shitty, maybe chuck a dry pair of socks in there, dry t-shirt, and the other thing I actually do chuck in is a pair of running shoes. So just if your feet were giving you real problems or you had a particular hot spot, you've actually got that option of changing your running shoes.
Yep.
And I've actually done that several times. I've changed the running shoe and it's been like an instant relief. So yeah, that's probably a hot tip, to put a different pair of running shoes in your drop bag just in case.
Right on. So we're probably looking like we're going to be out there for hopefully less than 7 hours. Are we likely to run into some low moods? You hear about that sort of stuff. Is it going to happen at a 50 for us?
Yeah, I think so, especially if you're sort of rattling along and pushing things along. I think the key to a low point is just sort of go through your processes, like check if everything's all right. So if it's a low point, like you're feeling sore or you're not running well, is just run through. And I think you actually mentioned it before, and we might not have been recording, is, are my shoes right? Are my feet right? And a lot of that is stepping over that puddle rather than running through it. All those little things to get yourself to that point that you want to get and to be still feeling really good at. But take the time to adjust your shoes if you need to. Take the time to re-tie up your drawstring on your shorts if you need to, because that time that you spend doing that is just totally irrelevant in the scheme of things. And then when you get psychologically low, I think sort of remember why you're doing it, what you want to achieve out of it, and then do your things. Like, I normally find I haven't quite got the nutrition right, so that's when you go back to your basics. When did I last have something to eat? When did I last have something to drink? Just really check off your basics, and chances are by the time you've run through all those basics, you've killed 20 minutes. And even if you spent that 20 minutes walking and sort of just trying to sort of get through that 20 or 30 minutes, you're 2 or 3 Ks closer to the finish. So always just keep moving forward. I've had a race where I walked for 14 hours. I didn't run a step. So you'd call that a pretty big low point. But the key to it is always just keep moving forward. There's no stopping. Just keep moving forward and just run through your checklist, and then run through your mental checklist. And I think, again, going back to it, that's what you work out in your training, because sometimes your long training runs suck.
Yeah.
And so just keep working through it.
Cool. Well, Steve, you've obviously given us a lot of great tips and advice for what will be hopefully our first 50k. How do you, as you sit here now, reflect on your first 50k? It was really hard. It would be up there with harder runs I've done. I think it is just because it is so unknown, sort of that extra bit of time out. So instead of doing a 4-hour marathon, it's 6 or 7 hours. So it is a lot longer time out there. It's generally different terrain to most people's first marathons.
and I think, to be honest, I've probably never been as sore after a race as that first 50k. So you guys will enjoy that. But yeah, I think it is such a rewarding and achievable distance, and probably, I guess you guys have got the benefits of doing it with each other, so you're going to have a lot of fun. You might run the first 5 or 10 Ks together, you might only run the first K together, or you might run the whole 50 Ks together. But you're going to have that team camaraderie, at the start line and the preparation. So I think that's probably 90% of a battle, is getting yourself to the start line. And then it's just going to be what it's going to be. Some days you have a good day, and then some days you have a bad day. But yeah, I think you just got to enjoy it, and it's a hell of a milestone. Like 99% of the people you talk to probably think you're mad running 10Ks, let alone 50Ks. So yeah, I think it's a big thing for anyone to take on, and probably from seeing where you guys started, like those 30-minute 5Ks, and sort of seeing you get down to those 25-minute 5Ks, and sort of knocking out those Ks sort of at under 5-minute pace. That's a hell of a difference from where you started. So the 50K probably seems as unachievable as running those 4-minute 30Ks were at the start. But yeah. I guess from my thing looking in, is I don't have any concerns about you guys completing that 50K and doing a good job of it, because I've seen all that progression and I've been through it all, and I know that if you put in the work, you're going to have a good day.
G'day again. Well, there was some great stuff in there, and that's really been a big help to both Owen and I. So thank you very much, Steve, for going through all that with us. Feeling a little bit better about what we're about to enter into. So if you're looking at doing any of these longer events, hope there was something that you could take out of that. Thanks very much, everyone.